Zor here from ZorGameGeek.com. Today we have a video about dry brushing. Dry brushing is often the final step that, well, not often, it is the final step for beginner painters. We can talk more in more medium to advanced painting, the techniques of adding some gradations of color in more complex minis, but for these skeletons, boy, all you need to do is base coat, wash, and then dry brush, and then do your seal coat, and you're done. So here we go. Here's dry brushing the skeleton miniatures. If you want to learn more, go to zorgamegeek.com/5. Here's the video. The next step is dry brushing the models. Now, typically, I like to come back, and when I dry brush, I like to use the same, at least start with the same color as the base coat, and then uptone it from there if I'm really trying to create lots of gradations. The problem with that is here we had the biggest contrast between the lightest color splintered bone and then the yellowed of the sepia wash. So using this really light shade is going to create too much contrast between the model and the dry brushing. So instead, I'm actually going to use the yellowed bone here as my dry brush color. So dry brushing is kind of like how it sounds, is you take paint and you get it on the end of a brush, and I didn't use a whole bunch here, and then you take basically a ruined brush. This brush is all sorts of jacked up. And you load the tip with the brush, and you then wipe off most of it because you want the brush to be dry. That's what this is, all different dry brushing where I've got, so we're just rubbing off. And then I like to come to the back of my hand here, and you can see it streaked up there a little bit, which showed that I still had some paint on it. Oh, and we can see I also glued on these plastic bases that I acquired from Reaper itself, from the couple of Kickstarters of it that I have backed. So now this fits in very nicely here, and I'm just taking, and so dry brushing, you're finding the ridges and just gently, hopefully I don't knock it, should be dried on here. You're finding the ridges and you're just gently putting in a bit of paint. Now you want to go with the, when you think about where the light's coming from, that's going to likely be the lightest. And it's going to get some on the other areas, but I'm just trying to primarily here go with the areas of bone. Then the outside of the leg, and then the top of the foot. You're trying to get this across the ridges, just the high points. Here, so I'm now coming across the top of this arm a little bit more, doing some down here in the rib cages, but not a ton. And then trying to get the top of the skull and then the face. And then this top of the thigh bone and the top of this foot. So it's lightened it up a little bit. I'm going to come back here and get this pelvis. A bit more. outside of this leg, and then this heel bone back here, and maybe the outside of this leg here. So it's not dramatic, but you should be able to see just small changes to the model as you are lightening it up. So that is that one. Now, this one originally started with the graveyard bone, and I'm gonna go back to it. Now, normally, you want your brush to be pretty dry, so I would rinse it out here and change the color, but these are all just the various bone colors. So I'm gonna skip that step here a little bit. So this is graveyard bone. And I'm going to put just a few drops of that into my palette. These are not big models. You're not gonna need a ton of dry brushing. I'm gonna load this up. Again, just go across here, and then, yeah, it's a little streaky, so it's a little, there we go. So it's just putting the slightest amount. And I'm going to start here with these high points, and then work on the face, because you're doing the opposite of the shading. You're trying to make the high points look a little brighter, whereas shading is trying to make the low points darker. So I'm just going to come across here and then hit these rib cages. And skeletons are good for both of these because they have both high points and low points. So, you heard the dogs barking there in the background. And so this is about done here. I've got a little bit of a dark spot across the Our final skeleton is the one that used the black wash, and it is pretty dark and contrasty as well. And because of that, I think I'm going to use the graveyard bone again. Well, why don't I use the splintered bone to kind of show what it looks like with a little bit lighter tone and higher contrast between the black wash over the yellow bone with this one. So we're gonna over here, just wipe off. I'm gonna come here to the back of the hand. That's actually really good. So now, because hopefully you will see more of the change here. I'm going ever so light to try to provide a little bit more contrast here between the dark, the black almost, well, not almost, black wash of this figure and these lighter pieces from the splintered bone, the surface or outer layers across the top of the foot. Oops. The thigh bone, the femur, again across the top of the foot. And then across the top of the arm here, a little bit across the top of the hand. bigger figures, you may have to reload the brush up a couple of times. Really trying to put a lot of shine there on that kneecap. And nothing stops you from dry brushing other sort of details if you wanted to really provide some layering for the fletching. But again, that's for more of a PC miniature or boss monster or some sort of unique sculpt, not just your standard skeleton sculpt. Okay, there we go. That is dry brushing. Now that I've gotten all 3 of those done, I'm going to rinse off my brush, wipe out the extra paint, and that is dry brushing. Let's come back, and that will hopefully dry pretty fast because you're not putting on a lot of paint. So that is the final step, is just putting a seal coat. I like, if I have the time, to do a gloss coat followed by a dull coat to provide the most protection. Gloss coats usually dry a little thicker, but they look shiny and wet. So unless these are some sort of underwater skeletons, you don't necessarily need them looking wet. So there we go with this one. And then finally, this one. Like to hear in the comments which one you think you like the best between these 3 paint jobs. We have Mr. Yellow, or Ms. Yellow, hard to say here. We have this looks like the dark one. So this is the dark one, not the yellowed one. And this is the dirty one, the more brownish, brown wash. Okay, that is dry brushing. All right, there you have it. There is the dry brushing of the skeleton miniatures. The improvements of the dry brushing here were a little subtle, I'll admit. On one of them was a little more dramatic. You could see the color really kind of popping out. But if you want to go back and look around the eyes, the face of the skeletons, and around the pelvis. You can really see that dry brushing really highlighting and bringing out those ridges and edges on the skeleton miniatures. If you want to learn more about the 5 basic techniques that I think all beginning miniature painters should learn, know, and practice, go to zorgamegeek.com/5. That is zorgamegeek.com/5. Until next time, keep gaming, keep painting, like and subscribe. I think I missed that earlier. Like and subscribe, because YouTube. Thanks, guys.